Rebecca, for the national interest waiver, do we need an employer to file for the green card process under the national interest waiver, or the people can file by themselves too?
Right. So one of the main advantages of filing for the national interest waiver is that you do not need an employer to sponsor you for the petition. You can have an employer sponsor you if they are willing to, but you can self-petition for the NIW.
So for example, if I'm working for some oil and gas company and I am very good in my whatever I do, and if I qualify for national, I can file myself an I-140?
Yeah, yeah, you would list yourself as the applicant on the I-140 petition.
So I can even get the green card without going to employer at all with this I-140 once it's approved?
Yes, if you qualify for the national interest waiver.
Is national interest waiver, does it come under EB1 category, employment-based one category, or EB2 category?
So it is only for the EB2 category only. It doesn't move you into EB1. It doesn't give you any advantage in applying for the adjustment of status, really, because your ability to apply for the I-485 will still depend on your priority date in the EB2 category.
But for the other country nationals other than Indian Chinese, the priority date is current. They may use this one to get it.
Definitely.
So also for those people whose companies are not filing the labor certification, and if they are eligible for it, they can use the I-140 to extend their H-1B if they file a national interest waiver.
Yeah, so even if your country of birth is India or China, the NIW could be advantageous for you if your employer, like we said earlier, is not willing to file, or even if they are willing to file the perm, but they are starting the process late due to the perm process taking so long right now, really 15 months minimum. I would say 18 months is more common. If you're getting close to the end of your 6-year limit, you're worried about the amount of time you have left to get an I-140 approval through your employer, it might be a good idea to start an NIW petition that you can self-file on your own without having to wait for your company to start the process.
What is the national interest waiver? Can you explain it, Rebecca?
Yeah, so for the national interest waiver, it's kind of 3 main criteria that you need to show to be eligible. First, you have to show that your proposed endeavor is of substantial merit and national importance. You have to show, secondly, that you are well positioned to advance that proposed endeavor. And then third is, the third criteria is kind of that on balance, it will be beneficial to the U.S. for them to waive the labor certification requirement. So the waiver is technically a waiver of the perm, of the going through the labor certification requirement. The whole idea is that if you can show that your work in the U.S. is going to benefit the country in a substantial way, then the government doesn't require you to go through the perm process of proving that there isn't, qualified U.S. workers to fill your position if you can show that what you're doing is beneficial enough to the country.
That's a little bit more technical for me, Rebecca.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, can you give me some of the examples which may fit into where people might fall into the national interest waiver, though?
Yeah, so one of the key words in those criteria is endeavor. So endeavor is more specific than occupation. So, for example, if your occupation in general is a chemist, that's your occupation. Maybe it's kind of beneficial, but what you need to define as your endeavor is maybe you're a chemist who is involved in vaccine research or vaccine development. Then that endeavor, your work in vaccine research or development, is what can qualify you potentially for the national interest waiver, not just the fact that you're a chemist. Or, for example, an engineer, if you're a mechanical engineer, just the fact that you're a mechanical engineer on its own doesn't qualify you. But if you can show that you are doing some work, for example, with a company that is doing kind of cutting edge work in high-speed rail, which in the US is, apparently far behind the situation in Europe, you may be able to define your endeavor that way.
So if a mechanical engineer working on the bullet train tracks or bullet train, those things, since we don't have it, while China and Europe have it, so that could probably lead, because it's not just a profession, it's a renowned endeavor which is doing much better than the normal mechanical engineer.
Right.
And now what if I'm working for Tesla. Now I'm inventing a self-driving thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm involving in some of the research in there for the autonomous driving. Is
Mm-hmm.
that do you think so that probably will be?
Yeah, so that's a good point. Actually, earlier this year, the Biden administration announced initiatives to basically bolster the administration's kind of priorities in the STEM fields, basically to strengthen U.S. competitiveness on the global scale in technology areas in particular. So the national interest waiver was one of the areas that the administration specifically addressed, that where it's not that just because you have a degree in a STEM field, you automatically qualify for the NIW. It's not that. You still have to show your endeavor, how it benefits the U.S., but there was language in that guidance that indicated specifically that if you have an advanced degree in a STEM field, a master's or PhD in a STEM field, that is a particularly favorable factor towards the NIW. And they also identified a list of, I think, 20-some kind of emerging technology areas, which include space engineering. It includes machine learning. Yeah.
Artificial intelligence.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So if you fit into those criteria, if they fit into those criteria, they have a higher chance.
Yeah.
What if I'm a teacher in a Mississippi? Mississippi states are less fortunate people are there, and then I am teaching students, and because of my teaching, a lot of the students are doing very good in these not so good areas where children are expected to do very good, but because of my teaching, do you think so that should qualify? That should take it?
Yeah, it can. So it does not need to be a STEM field, kind of the area of endeavor. The kind of one of the benefits of the NIW is that it can allow for some creative arguments as long as you can show from the evidence, and a lot of it will involve sort of research on kind of your profession, sort of even in that particular area. You do, in general, need to still show that your endeavor is of national importance. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be national in scope, but that if it has kind of some national importance, which, for example, underserved education populations could.
What about if I'm a cardiologist? Does it automatically qualify me in the national interest waiver?
Not just by being a cardiologist on your own, but there is something called the physician national interest waiver. So that is almost a slightly separate category. It's still under the national interest waiver, but basically there is a provision.
You're speaking of underserved areas.
Yes.
Well, let's not discuss about. What if I'm not in the underserved area? I'm a cardiologist, but I'm actually doing some research work as part of the cardiology work for a medical company or for a university. How do you?
Yeah, so if you are doing kind of cutting edge medical research, obviously, anything cancer research related, the administration has also come out strongly, in favor of the cancer initiatives. That is kind of a strong factor. So if you're on the research side, you have to kind of show that you meet those 3 criteria, but it's a pretty strong argument. Or if you're not in the research side, but you're a physician in clinical practice, if you can show that you've served at least 5 years or will serve 5 years in a medically underserved area or a VA facility, you actually don't have to go through those 3 criteria. You can apply for the PNIW, the Physician National Interest Waiver.
For speaking of regular NIW, for the what if I am a postdoc, but my university is not going to file under EB1B category? Do I automatically fit into national interest waiver, or do I need to show something?
You still need to kind of show what your research
will benefit.
Yeah, is endeavoring to do, and that it will benefit the U.S. in some way.
What if my research is in vaccination field? Do you think so? That could probably be a good criteria for getting.
That would be a strong candidate.
Okay, and is there a premium? How long does it take the process though for I-140 process though?
Yeah, so one thing to be aware of is that the national interest waiver does not have kind of across the board premium processing. For most of its history, there was no premium processing option at all for NIW I-140 petitions. And in regular processing, it takes well over a year, I would say closer to maybe 16 months. However, just recently, the USCIS announced limited premium processing options for NIWs. At this time, if your NIW petition has been pending since before February 1st, 2022, you can upgrade it to premium processing by submitting the additional $2,500 fee. And this premium processing isn't the 15-day turnaround that's for most I-140s and H-1Bs. It is a 45-day turnaround is what the premium upgrade will get you for the NIW. So you can't file a new NIW and premium processing at this time, but USCIS is kind of, they've been expanding the premium processing eligibility for NIWs since they first rolled it out earlier this year. So hopefully we will get to a point where you can file for premium earlier in NIW.
For most people, you need to consider that, especially if your company is not filing the labor certification, you should consider yourself to see if you fit in the national interest waiver. As Rebecca has pointed out, if you're just a lawyer, if you're just a cardiologist, that may not be enough. You need to show that you are doing very good in your endeavor. That means within your profession, you're doing much better than the normal, and probably involving some research or some underserved areas. It's definitely better. You may want to consider it. Especially we notice that some of the companies, they don't file the labor certification at all. You may have to go back to your home country after your 6 years of H-1B or your L-1 visa. You should seriously consider national interest waiver. Now, how do they contact if they want to contact you, Rebecca?
Yeah, they can schedule a consultation or email me directly. Usually, kind of the first items we'll need is a detailed CV and a link to your Google Scholar page. Those are usually the first things we ask for to do an assessment of NIW eligibility.
So a resume, when they make an appointment with you, if they attach the resume, then it will be easier for you to evaluate when they discuss with you.
Yeah.
Normally, how long if you in the initial consultation, you thought that, okay, this is the right case to go for the national interest waiver, how long does it take for you to file the I-1?
It does take longer than preparing a regular perm-based I-140, definitely, because it does require gathering a lot of evidence to kind of show what the endeavor is, how it relates to U.S. interests. So there is research on our side. From the applicant side, we do usually also need reference letters. 3 to 6 is best to kind of, that goes into the showing that you're well positioned to advance the proposed endeavor. So usually reference letters, not only from people who are your direct colleagues, but it is stronger when there are reference letters from people in the industry who may not be directly linked to you, but who have heard of your work. That's usually kind of a more objective statement and is stronger in the as a piece of evidence. So I would say probably 1 to 2 months is pretty typical, depending on how long it takes to get those reference letters. Sometimes, going back and forth with the people that are going to write the letters for you may take some time.
Don't get the reference letter, guys, before you consult a lawyer, because once you get a reference letter and then you want to get it differently, then the person who's giving a reference letter may not be happy about it. So before you get a reference letter, it's probably better to speak with a lawyer to get an idea what should be there in the reference letter. We typically want the things of your work nature, the work that you're doing, how is it benefiting? But it's better to have a consultation with a lawyer before you get the reference letter. Anything else, Rebecca?
No.
Thank you very much for tuning in.